welcome all three experts. We are very privileged to have the senior most policymaker, the IAS officer from Government of Telangana, who is Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, senior IAS officer from the state of Telangana. We also have Mr. Ashok Mittal, who is the chancellor of LPU, the lovely professional university, very prominent university in the North India. And we have Mr. Ranajit Hajre, who is the executive vice president at Tejas Networks, now a leading telecom player, telecom network player, now based out of Bangalore. So with this, let me first invite Mr. Jayesh Ranjan IAS. More than an IAS officer, the main ingredient for today is he holds a master's degree in psychology, because teachers are all today worried what will be the future of learning, future of teachers. So his background is psychology. He did business management in IIM Calcutta. He did masters in public management from NUS, and he's a principal secretary for both Industries and Commerce and Information Technology Department of Telangana. So his brain became various technology and innovation initiatives in Telangana, and more than that, he supports various social initiatives as part of a lot of supporting a lot of NGOs or not-for-profit initiatives. So with this, let me invite Mr. Jayesh Ranjan IAS to deliver an opening keynote to the educators. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning to fellow panelists, Professor Mittal and Mr. Ranajit. Welcome to greetings to all the participants, eminent professors, faculty members, educationists. My name is Jayesh Ranjan, as has been told. I work for the government here in Telangana, and I look after the IT sector and the industries sector. I would also like to add that for the last 8-9 months now, I'm also officiating as a Vice Chancellor of a very major state technology university located in Hyderabad, which is called JNTU, the Jawaharlal Nehru Technology University. So the perspectives that I will share also will include lots of real-time examples of what we are doing in JNTU, what kind of efforts we are making, and so on and so forth. So, of course, it is very clear to all of us that the nature of teaching learning has been severely impacted by this pandemic. And I can give you an example, which is there right in my home. My daughter is appearing in the 10th class exams, and she wrote 6-7 papers. But suddenly it was decided that the exams will not be conducted thereafter. So she is still to write 3 more papers, and there is tremendous amount of uncertainty. First of all, what will happen to those 3 papers? How will the 10th class results be declared? Because all of us know the 10th class results are very defining. I mean, all of us make career choices, and later on also this is one basic thing which employers look at. So this puts some kind of a question mark. And secondly, what happens to class 11th instructions? So she had applied for some colleges, local colleges in Hyderabad, to secure admissions, and even when her 10th class exams are not yet over, the results have not yet come, she has been given admissions, and in some of the classes on some of the schools, online classes have also started. So it's a very peculiar kind of a situation. I have still not cleared 10th class. I have not yet completed my exams, but in the 11th class, instructions have started. Some assignments are being checked, and because I have applied to multiple colleges, I mean, I'm attending classes from multiple colleges and so on and so forth. So it's a very confusing kind of a scenario. And then if I look at what is happening in JNTU also, we are more or less in similar footing. The engineering colleges, as many of you would know, have semester systems. So the semester was not yet completed. The course, the syllabus was not yet completed, and suddenly this lockdown was announced. So it took a while, almost 7 to 10 days, for us to kind of get our act together. But thereafter, we took a very important decision that we will complete the syllabus. Our original target was to complete them by 30th of April. But because we felt that there are certain bottlenecks in doing that, so we have extended it till 7th of April. So 7th of May rather. So in the next 2-3 days, we expect the syllabus to be completed for all the engineering courses. But we also realized that this has also challenges. For example, the university also has lots of students from rural areas, children who are not from very affluent kind of families. In many families, we found that they don't have a device on which they can take these online classes sometimes we found that they are living in some locations where the connectivity is not there, bandwidth is not there. So we are getting some feedback, and our assessment is that even though we are making an effort to complete the syllabus, only about 80% of the students would have been able to participate in these online classes. And again, unlike a conventional classroom where let us say 50 children, 50 students will be sitting before the faculty, and the faculty can keep an eye on all of them. If he finds someone getting taking an interest in raising a question, he can give a chance. The online method is not that seamless. For example, now also I'm interacting with all of you. I see on the count of participants, there are 2,500 odd participants. Now, I really do not know whether it is making sense to all of you. Would anyone like to ask question? Of course, there is a chat facility where questions can be posted, but I have been attending lots of webinars in the last 1 month or so, practically one or two every day. And sometimes the pace of questions which come on the chat box, it is very difficult to keep track and answer all of them. So online education has also got some limitations. In the university, the other thing which we are doing is that we are recording all the lessons and we are also putting them on YouTube. So for some reason, if there was some connectivity issue or there was some challenge in accessing or being online at that point in time when the lesson was delivered, you can always have the facility of looking it up on the YouTube channel. But we all know that YouTube will not be interactive at all. So definitely some essence of classroom instructions is lost when we do this kind of an online teaching. But I'm sure because this has become a very important imperative, a very important need of the hour, technology will keep pace. I already know that Cisco has a facility which is called telepresence, and I have seen that in the campus of BITS here in Hyderabad. BITS, as many of you would know, has 4 campuses. The original in Pilani, one in Hyderabad, one in Goa, and then there is one in Dubai. And what I have seen, I have personally seen this happen, that whoever is the best faculty of a particular course or a particular topic, he may be located anywhere. He could be in Pilani, he could be in Hyderabad, but he takes the classes commonly for all the 4 campuses. And they have a huge video wall which Cisco has established for them, which is called telepresence. So it is like virtually seeing the class in front of your eyes, and students can raise up, they can put a question, faculty can interact. So there is no difference at all between having a physical classroom and a classroom through telepresence. But of course, it is very, very expensive, and I guess BITS has been able to run it successfully for the last so many years. I remember seeing it in their campus almost 5-6 years ago. And of course, I've seen the original in Cisco's campus in the US. But other kind of technology options will also develop. So this is about teaching learning, that how do you make efforts to close the syllabus. And the other important challenge is how do you conduct exams. Now, we had our academic senate meeting just about 5-6 days ago, when there was a very big debate and an inconclusive debate on how to conduct exams. Now, online exams are possible, but many faculty were still not convinced. They were saying that a student can take exam from his home, but what if his brother or some colleague or someone is sitting behind the camera? He's not captured in the camera, but he kind of prompts him or helps him and so on and so forth. So the sanctity of this exam process will be lost. Many of the people were not in favor of online exams, but many others said that this is the only option. We can tighten some features. For example, we can send captchas every, let us say, 15 minutes, so that you have to continue to respond to those captchas to confirm that you are yourself writing the exam. Selfies have to be taken. So lots of suggestions were given, but it still remains inconclusive. So how do we really evaluate the students? Also, discussions are happening, debates are happening, and I'm sure technology will keep pace on what do we want to do. Another very important area which I wanted to speak about, of course, we have eminent people like Dr. Mittal who are part of this webinar. So I'm sure when they speak, it will make more sense. But from a technology university point of view, and in general from a governmental point of view or from a societal point of view, the nature of jobs are also going to change quite drastically. We know for sure that some of the sectors which are badly impacted due to this pandemic, just to name a few, These are hospitality, travel, automotive, luxury consumer goods, and so on, and entertainment, sports, and so on and so forth. Many of these sectors will definitely see a long time for recovery, and therefore we can't expect too much of new employment to happen in these sectors. So just to continue with an example, let us say one of you is a faculty in a hotel management institute, a tourism management and hotel management institute. Now we are right now seeing a big flux in this particular sector, and lots of people, even when they have got good experience, very good academic track record, are losing their jobs. People have been put on furlough, their salaries have been cut. Many of them are not likely to be retained by their companies. So your academic record does not matter at all. Your experience does not matter at all, because the sector itself is hit so badly that the need to employ newer people and more people does not arise as of now. Only after recovery happens, which may happen after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So it is an uncertain future for these kind of institutions. Now, suppose you are a administrator or a faculty member or an owner of a hotel management institute, or your institute has a course on hotel management. Now, how do you do? What do you do? How many students do you admit? How do you change some of the conventional topics which you were teaching? How do you tweak the syllabus to make it aligned with the new reality? So these are also some of the challenges which all of us face. But at the same time, we also see lots of new opportunities appearing. For example, in this period, the banking sector, the finance sector, the insurance sector, what we collectively called as the BFSI sector, that has grown quite a lot because lots of new innovations have happened. Fintech products have come. There is a need. For example, in Telangana itself, government has distributed 1,500 rupees every month to every poor family and 500 rupees to every migrant labor. Now, this is a mammoth exercise to distribute so much of money, and obviously technologies are required, identification systems are required, and so on and so forth. So this sector will continue to do well. There are many other sectors also. Educational technology, for instance, since all of us are in the field of education, I already alluded to 2-3 requirements on how do you conduct online classes, how do you conduct exams, and so on and so forth. So these are technologies which we are eagerly waiting for, and the better the technology, the more user-friendly the technology, the more sophisticated and foolproof the technology, I'm sure that technology is going to sweep that market. So people who are into this area, what is called EdTech, they are going to do well. And there are many others also, because so much of work from home is happening. Cyber security has become a challenge. When you were working in an office, the office systems had their own protection. There was a security officer, there was a CISO, cyber threats were monitored, and so on and so forth. But now everyone is working at home, and we are not very sure whether your laptop is used by your family members, your children, and so on and so forth. So cyber security has become a very important discipline. So as education administrators, if we are teaching courses which relate to sectors which are impacted, we have to think on how do we reinvent ourselves, what kind of tweaking is required in the syllabus. If we remain blind to the reality and continue to teach conventional stuff, I mean, first of all, you will look very silly, and second, you will be doing a disservice to your students. Your students will come out and they will find that they have no employment opportunities at all. So this is an exercise which we need to do collectively. And similarly, the opportunity to bring new courses, introduce new courses. So as I told you, I'm the Vice Chancellor of the Jawaharlal Nehru Technology University. One decision which we took in our academic senate is that from the next academic session, whichever course you are enrolled in, you must do compulsorily a credit course on cybersecurity. Even if you are studying civil engineering, even if you are studying mechanical engineering, it is not computer science students. Whatever you are studying, you must do a compulsory course, a credit course in cybersecurity. Similarly, we noticed that all these edtech and fintech and health tech, etc., many of these solutions are being supported by artificial intelligence. So we have again taken a similar decision that regardless of who you are, artificial intelligence must be you must be familiar with artificial intelligence, and therefore in your third year the university will teach you a compulsory course on artificial intelligence. So these are important decisions which we have taken at our university. You can also look at the scenario, the horizon confronting you in similar ways, and take a decision on what kind of similar courses to offer. The last thing which I wanted to share with you was that while we struggle with our ongoing syllabus completion, evaluation, exams, think about offering new courses, tweaking existing courses, one very big change which is going to happen in the nature of work, in the nature of employment, relates to entrepreneurship. We will. I was reading the newspapers today before this webinar, and a couple of newspapers have written, as many of you would know, Indians who are living abroad or who are stranded abroad, facility has been created for them to be brought back by special relief flights, and we are expecting a few lakhs of Indians who are in the US, UK, Malaysia, Singapore, Africa to come back. But a large number, the largest number of people who will come back are from the Gulf countries, from the Middle East. So there is a very interesting article in the Times of India here in Hyderabad, which is mentioning, which has quoted some experts also, that there are two ways of looking at this problem, or let us say this scenario, that hundreds and thousands of people are returning from Middle East to Telangana, to other states, and obviously Kerala is the one which will be the largest recipient. So what do we do with them? And one of the arguments which I found very compelling was that convert them into entrepreneurs, because typically in Middle East, while they may be working as some mason or some carpenter or some office manager or something, that is a city which is the hotbed of entrepreneurship. So first of all, they would have definitely earned some salary, they would have saved some salary, and also they would have exposed to lots of entrepreneurial opportunities in the Middle East countries, and encourage them to try those models with proper guidance, with proper hand-holding, with proper safety nets, to try it out in our country, in our state. And this is a model which I liked quite a lot, and I'm going to work on it. I'm going to create a structured program on entrepreneurship, so people who come back from Middle East or elsewhere also for that matter, if they want to rejoin the workforce, let them to find employment by sending their CVs here and there, but let us also give entrepreneurship as a very serious option to them. And this is something which I would expect will gain traction more and more and more. So it is not about the Gulf returnees alone, even your students. So in Telangana, again, I would like to give some real examples. We have an organization called TASK, Telangana Academy for Skills and Knowledge, which works with all the engineering colleges and tells them about the new courses, organizes short modules which their students can learn apart from their syllabus. And we are going to reorient TASK to also offer entrepreneurship programs in all the colleges. So to ensure that in every college there is an entrepreneurship cell, there is a couple of or a few very strong faculty who have a flair for entrepreneurship, who have been trained in entrepreneurship. Similarly, as all of you would know, in the engineering curriculum, typically a student is required to do a college project. Typically he does it in his third year. And what we want to do from now onwards is that bring an element of entrepreneurship in that project. So you don't have to give just a solution or work on some technology proposal, but also convert it into a business plan. So how will you sell that technology? How will you commercialize that technology? How will you take it to people? So this is again a very good opportunity which we see can be channelized right from our college days, so that tomorrow we have a ready-made pool of people who can become entrepreneurs if they have that inclination to. Because the job market will still remain volatile, and a lot will depend upon consumer behavior. What the world is predicting is that it will take a long time for consumers to start their spending habits, to start their usual consumer behavior in a normal way. Most people are expected to save money, to hoard money, postpone non-essential kind of expenditure, not at all spend money on what are called luxury items, manage with what is best available, spend more money on personal healthcare, hygiene, and so on and so forth. So definitely this kind of consumer behavior, when too much of money is not circulating around, will obviously impact the economy, and therefore jobs in multiple sectors, apart from the some which I named, which will be directly affected, they will all have some uncertainties. So therefore preparing a pool of entrepreneurs is something which is a very big service that we'll be doing for our society, for our country, for our state. So these are my thoughts on how do we conduct our regular academic activities, how do we look at bringing new courses which are more relevant for employment, etc. and at the same time, how do we also give a long or a very strong emphasis on entrepreneurship by conducting some very serious, deep-rooted programs. So these are my thoughts, and I look forward to listening to the other speakers, and also hope to remain in touch with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I just picked up two questions from the chat to get a brief answer from you, sir. One, I think not only Telangana, entire India, when we are trying to move and talk about digital, everybody are worried about their rural students' connectivity, sir. Do you foresee every student will be assured of internet connectivity in future? Like, it's going to happen?
Yes. So this has also made us realize that however much we talk about digital, unless digital infrastructure is not provided in every nook and corner of the country, it will be meaningless to talk about digital. We will be only creating a digital divide between the people who are living in cities, who have broadband, who have Wi-Fi, who have 4G, 5G, and those who are living in rural areas. So we'll be creating a huge divide in the society, which will be very, very, very unfair. So both the government as well as the private sector have decided to fast track all such initiatives. So in Telangana, we have a program called T-Fiber. And the idea is that every household in Telangana has close to 9 million households. Every household will be connected with reliable high-speed internet connectivity, broadband, through copper wire, through optic cable fiber. And this was supposed to be a project which would have taken over 2 years to complete. But given the reality today, we have decided to fast track it. And I know that other internet providers also, like Jio, Airtel, they are also, because many times they require approvals and permissions, etc. And as a government, we have decided to simplify that process so that they are also able to roll out their infrastructure very, very fast. So it is only a matter of maybe 1 to 2 years before we will see very high quality, reliable internet connectivity even in rural areas.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. I think now you spoke, wearing the hat of JNTU Associate Vice Chancellor. So, do you think this open book exam is going to come in a big way? Any comments on that?
Yes. So this is also definitely very much on the cards. In fact, I myself have attended an institution where we used to have open book exams. So I'm familiar with, at a personal level also, what is the meaning of open book. And as a student, I still remember when the faculty would tell us that our next exam will be open book, we would feel happy that, oh, you don't have to study before. But when you are actually writing the exam, you would realize that it is much more difficult had it been an exam with a conventional kind of a thing. So definitely changes in the evaluation system will come. Instead of relying on one big exam, which you are not able to conduct, or there are some technology or logistics challenges, the evaluation will be more continuous. Your classroom participation, your assignments, your quizzes, and this assignments particularly will be very, very important. And these will be qualitative assignments, project work, etc. So reliance on one big exam perhaps will come down. And if at all exams have to happen, we may not demand the students to come to a particular hall and sit there. We have technologies, we have facial recognition software, we have captchas. So student can remain in his home, consult his books, etc., write the exam, and relatively we can be secure that no one is assisting, there is no malpractice, and so on and so forth. So these innovations have to happen, and whoever can do it fast and demonstrate it to others that it is working, that will be a very great service for all of us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your answer, sir. I think we are very privileged to hear the two sides. One is as IT secretary, giving us confidence on the internet and digital divide, and also as a JNTU's the largest universities officiating vice chancellor, giving us perspective on how education is going to change. Thank you very much for your time and
thank you very much.
Our teachers. Thanks a lot, sir.